For weeks now, three key crossing points linking Crimea to southern Ukraine have been under mounting strain. Chonhar, Henichesk, and Armyansk have stopped being simple bridges or road links. They're turning into flashpoints in a logistics fight that could shape whether Russia can keep its forces supplied along the entire southern front. Trucks still cross, trains still run, fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements still reach Crimea. But war today isn't always won by one dramatic explosion or a bridge collapsing on camera. Sometimes the shift starts quietly, when every convoy has to take the long way around, when every shipment takes an extra hour or two, when transport routes have to operate under the constant shadow of drones, missiles, and precision fire. That's the pattern taking shape around Crimea right now. Russia keeps reinforcing the peninsula with trenches, minefields, air defense batteries, and coastal units, while Ukraine appears to be chasing something else entirely: the roads, the supply hubs, the connective tissue holding the whole system together. And if those links keep getting pulled deeper into a hostile environment, what gives first? Does Russia's logistics network bend and adapt, or does Crimea slowly become too costly to hold as a functioning military base? Let's dig into it with military force. Ukraine is stretching this fight beyond the front line and into the roads and bridges tying Russia's southern war effort to Crimea. This is the first layer of the campaign, and it matters because logistics is what determines how long an army can keep moving, firing, repairing, and replacing what it loses. This isn't about one bridge or a single headline strike. It's a broader squeeze on the network, connecting Crimea to Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Donetsk. Chonhar, Henichesk, and Armyansk matter because they sit at the narrow northern approaches Russian forces rely on to reach the peninsula. These aren't just roads. They're the arteries fuel, ammunition, spare parts, food, medical supplies, and fresh troops have to pass through before they can reinforce operations further north. That's why sustained pressure on these crossings can do more damage than what's visible on the structure itself. A bridge can stay standing and still count as a liability if Russian commanders think it might get hit again. So they cut back traffic, move convoys at night, break them into smaller groups, or reroute supplies entirely. None of those choices sound dramatic on their own. Every one of them costs time, and time becomes a real tactical problem the moment frontline troops need shells, fuel, replacement vehicles, or a medevac at a specific hour, and it doesn't show up. The detours create their own headaches too. Push traffic off the fastest crossings, and it ends up on longer roads, tighter corridors, with fewer places to safely stop. That makes movement easier to spot and harder to conceal. A convoy that once had several route options gets funneled into predictable lanes. A repair truck or fuel tanker forced onto a longer path might show up late, or it might never make it to the unit that's waiting on it. The Kerch Bridge is still the best-known link between Russia and Crimea, but it can't carry the whole burden on its own. If the northern crossings stay under constant threat, more weight shifts onto Kerch and the rail and road system feeding into it. That doesn't mean Crimea gets cut off. It means the whole system has to work harder under more strain, with commanders trying to protect more traffic using fewer safe options. And that's really the point of Ukraine's approach. Kyiv doesn't need to blow up every bridge at once. It just needs Russia running its southern logistics with less confidence, less speed, and less margin for error. From here, the battlefield stops being confined to trenches and villages. It spreads out across every road, every crossing, every supply run heading toward Crimea. That's where this campaign starts to bite. Ukraine is turning Russia's southern supply corridor into a moving target, and the pressure now reaches well past the actual front line. The route running from Rostov through Mariupol, Melitopol, and on toward Crimea is one of the main arteries keeping Russian forces supplied. Fuel, ammunition, repair gear, vehicles, troops, and supplies all move through this corridor. It matters because southern operations run on movement. Artillery can't back up infantry without shells arriving first. Vehicles can't reposition without fuel. Damaged equipment needs recovery crews and spare parts before it gets back into service. When deliveries stay on schedule, a front can keep up the pressure. When they slip, the whole system slows down. Ukraine isn't only after isolated vehicles here. The larger goal is making every single movement along this corridor feel less certain. Reconnaissance drones are the first piece of that pressure. They can watch roads, tree lines, rail yards, parking areas, and supply points from overhead. A convoy that's hidden from ground level can still get spotted from the air through dust, heat signatures, tire tracks, or repeated movement patterns. Once a route gets flagged, Ukrainian operators can pick out what matters most to hit. That's not always the biggest vehicle in the convoy. A fuel truck can outrank an armored carrier in importance because it's what keeps everything else moving. An ammunition truck can matter more than a combat vehicle because it feeds several firing positions at once. A command vehicle, a repair truck, or a supply depot can also become the priority if taking it out creates confusion and delay elsewhere. FPV drones are dangerous precisely because they can hit specific vehicles with real precision. They don't need to wipe out an entire convoy to change the outcome. If the lead fuel truck burns, everything behind it might stop, scatter, or turn back. Long-range drones push that same danger deeper into zones Russia used to treat as safe rear areas. The front line isn't the only place logistics can break down anymore. Storage sites, staging grounds, repair yards, fuel depots, and transport hubs can all come under pressure if Ukraine manages to locate them. That's a bigger headache for Russian planners, because supplies have to gather somewhere before they move forward. Vehicles have to stop, refuel, load, unload, and regroup. Every army needs those pauses, but they also leave patterns behind. A staging yard used too often gets noticed. A route driven every night becomes predictable. Camouflage only works so long when the same vehicles keep coming and going. Russia can answer by splitting convoys smaller, moving at night, layering on camouflage and jamming, or switching up routes. Each of those tricks might cut one risk, but it adds a different cost. Smaller convoys mean more total trips. Night movement slows down coordination. Detours burn extra fuel. Added protection ties up vehicles and crews needed somewhere else. Commanders end up having to choose between speed, secrecy, and protection, and they almost never get all three at once. Precision fire adds one more layer on top. Once reconnaissance flags a target, Ukraine can pick the right tool depending on range, value, and timing. FPV drones handle moving vehicles near the contact line. Longer-range drones reach deeper. Artillery or guided fire hits supply points within range. The method shifts, but the goal stays the same: wreck the rhythm of the Russian war machine. One destroyed truck is a local loss. A delayed fuel column is a bigger problem. A hit repair site can sideline several vehicles at once. A strike on an ammunition convoy can choke off fire support for units that need it most. Understood this way, Ukraine's campaign is really a fight over timing and reliability. Russia can still push supplies toward Crimea, but it has to do it with more caution, more escort, and a lot more uncertainty. Watch the logistics picture long enough, and it becomes clear: Ukraine isn't just after trucks. It's trying to make Crimea harder to feed from the outside. Ukraine's public messaging on Crimea has gotten sharper. The goal is to make the peninsula harder for Russia to supply, defend, and use as a military platform. That's why Ukrainian officials like Mikhailo Fedorov, along with Robert Brovdy, known by the call sign Magyar, keep putting drones at the center of the conversation. Their point isn't just that drones can hit things. It's that unmanned systems let Ukraine lean on the entire support network in and around Crimea at once. That matters because Crimea isn't only territory, it's a military platform. Russia relies on it for air defense, command functions, storage, naval operations, fuel movement, and backing for operations across southern Ukraine. Disrupt those functions one at a time, and the peninsula can stay occupied while becoming steadily less useful and far more expensive to hold. Ukraine's approach runs on connected pressure. Bridges get hit to disrupt movement. Fuel depots get hit to slow down vehicles, generators, ships, and aircraft. Air defense sites get hit to open up more airspace for drones. Command posts get hit to slow decision-making. Ports and rail links get hit because they carry the bigger flows of equipment and supplies. This isn't a single headline strike, it's systematic. Damage one part of the network, and Russia can patch it. Hit several parts over time, and repairs get much harder to coordinate. A damaged bridge forces a detour. A fuel shortage cuts the value of that detour. A weakened radar network makes the next strike easier to line up. A command post under threat forces officers to relocate, hide, or scale back activity. That's why the word isolation needs careful handling here. It doesn't mean Crimea gets sealed off overnight. It doesn't mean every road, port, bridge, and rail line has ground to a halt. Russia still has routes, forces, air defenses, engineering units, and plenty of political reasons to keep the peninsula running. A solid analysis avoids claiming collapse is already underway. The more honest read is that Ukraine is chipping away at Russia's freedom of action. If supply routes need more protection, if fuel has to sit farther from the front, if command posts have to move constantly, and if air defense units have to cover more ground at once, then Crimea becomes harder to manage. It's still a base, it just doesn't run with the same confidence anymore. That shifts the political meaning of the whole campaign too. For Kyiv, Crimea isn't just a future battlefield, it's a system that can be worn down long before any larger operation gets seriously considered. That's why drone production, target selection, and long-range strike planning are all part of the same story now. The aim is to make Russian control more fragile without needing to launch a direct assault right away. For Moscow, that pressure creates a very different problem. It has to defend symbols, troops, roads, depots, airfields, ports, and radar sites all at the same time. Reinforcing one area can leave another exposed. Moving supplies out of harm's way can slow delivery. Concentrating defenses around key assets can end up revealing exactly which assets matter most. That's the strategic reasoning behind why Western analysts tend to start every Crimea scenario with logistics. Before anyone talks about a future ground operation, the real first question is whether Russia can keep the peninsula supplied, coordinated, and protected under sustained pressure. Ukraine's leadership seems to get that. They're not just talking about Crimea as land. They're framing it as a military system that can be strained until its value starts dropping. Western analysts often boil Crimea down to one simple rule. Before Ukraine can even think about retaking the peninsula, Russia has to first find it genuinely difficult to keep forces there. That logic tracks with thinking often credited to former U.S. Army Europe commander Ben Hodges. The point isn't that a ground campaign would be easy. It's that any serious Crimea scenario has to start with supply, protection, and command. Attacking a prepared fortress head-on is one of the hardest things to pull off in war. If the defender still has fuel, ammunition, air defense, reserves, engineers, and working communications, the attacker pays an enormous price. Crimea fits that description closely. Narrow approaches, layered defensive belts, airfields, ports, radar sites, and heavy political weight for Moscow. The more realistic sequence starts well before any troops move toward the peninsula. First, supply lines get squeezed. Then the air defense network gets worn down enough to open more room for drones and precision strikes. From there, Ukraine can keep targeting storage sites, command posts, ports, rail nodes, and airfields. Only once those layers have taken damage over time do larger military or political options start looking realistic. A few specific locations explain why this matters. Dzhankoy matters because it links rail and military transport inside Crimea. Kerch stays critical because it's the direct link between Russia and the peninsula. Perekop matters as one of the narrow land gates from the north. The rail network matters because heavy supplies can't move efficiently by truck alone. Stress all of these points at once, and Russia might still hold the ground, but holding it gets a lot harder. A fortress doesn't fall just because its walls take hits. It falls when fuel stops showing up, when shells get rationed, when repair crews can't reach damaged vehicles, and when commanders can't move information fast enough. That's why pressure on logistics can shift the battlefield before any major offensive even starts. It wears down the defender without needing an immediate frontal assault. This is where the real cost of holding Crimea comes into focus. Russia has long treated the peninsula as a military asset, a base for aircraft, naval operations, storage, air defense, and pressure on southern Ukraine. Ukraine is working to flip that math. If Crimea needs constant protection, endless repairs, more fuel shuttling, and emergency rerouting on top of all that, it stops being purely an asset. It becomes a drain on Russian planning instead. None of this means a Ukrainian ground operation is imminent or certain. It means the conditions around Crimea are being reshaped piece by piece. Military planners rarely go straight at the strongest point if they can wear down what surrounds it first, and Ukraine's campaign seems to be following exactly that logic. Pressure on logistics, air defense, command, ports, and rail links is meant to chip away at Russia's ability to run the peninsula as a stable rear area, and that pressure can build slowly while still producing real effects. As those support layers erode, the next question becomes more practical. Ukraine doesn't need to announce a coming assault for Crimea to grow more exposed. The real question is, which routes, crossings, and pressure points matter most if the balance starts to tip in the months ahead? Ukraine's future options around Crimea would hinge on whether this isolation campaign builds enough pressure on Russia's southern position. No route here is simple, and nothing should be treated as guaranteed, but a few areas would matter more if Russian logistics, air defense, and command links keep wearing down. The first possible axis runs through Zaporizhia, Tokmak, and Melitopol. This is one of the most sensitive corridors in the entire war, because it points straight at Russia's land bridge to Crimea, the connection linking occupied Donbass with southern Ukraine and the peninsula. Serious pressure along this axis would force Russia into a genuine dilemma: defend the front line and the connective corridor that lets men, fuel, ammunition, and heavy equipment move across the south at the same time. Tokmak and Melitopol matter because they sit right along the route, supporting that broader link. Even limited pressure here could push Moscow to shift reserves, reinforce rear defenses, and protect more road and rail traffic, stretching forces already stretched thin, defending Crimea, Donetsk, and the southern front all at once. The second area is Perekop. This narrow gateway connects Crimea to the mainland from the north, and its geography hands defenders a clear advantage since attackers have almost no room to maneuver. Minefields, artillery, drones, anti-tank obstacles, and prepared positions can make any push here brutally costly. so Perekop can't be treated as an easy way in. But that same narrow geography can flip into a weakness for Russia once its support system starts straining. An easy-to-defend choke point can turn into a trap when supplies arrive late, when air defense is spread thin, and when movement through the rear becomes unreliable. In that scenario, Perekop stops being purely a defensive line and starts functioning as a pressure point in its own right. The third area is the Sivash region, a stretch of shallow water, marshland, and mud that's one of the most complicated approaches near Crimea. It's a poor fit for a large, straightforward armored push. Weather, water levels, visibility, engineering support, and Russian surveillance would all factor in heavily. Any operation here would carry real risk, but rough terrain can also open doors for smaller forces. Special units, reconnaissance teams, or mobile groups might exploit unexpected routes if Russian attention is pulled elsewhere. That would require sharp intelligence, precise timing, solid drone coverage, and fire support ready to back it up. Without those pieces in place, the terrain itself could turn out more dangerous than the enemy. None of these routes are predictions. They're potential pressure points that would only matter if the broader campaign around Crimea reaches a more advanced stage. Before any of this becomes realistic, Ukraine still has to keep wearing down the systems, letting Russia hold the peninsula in the first place. Even so, one hard fact remains constant. Russia is turning Crimea into a dense, layered defensive zone. Moscow understands the peninsula is still one of the most valuable military prizes of this entire war, and the defenses going up there aren't for show. They're built to slow, channel, and punish any Ukrainian move. The setup includes trenches, minefields, concrete fortifications, anti-tank barriers, coastal defense units, radar sites, layered air defense, and internal security forces. Bastion and Bow coastal missile systems add another layer along the shoreline, while garrison troops and Rosgvardia units guard facilities, roads, and rear areas. Together, all of that shows Russia is bracing for something well beyond small raids or isolated drone strikes. But even a fortress has a vulnerability if it needs resupplying every single day. Static defenses can stop movement, but they can't manufacture fuel. Minefields can block an assault, but they can't replace ammunition. Air defense batteries can shield chosen targets, but they still need missiles, radar support, trained crews, maintenance, and safe firing positions. Coastal missiles can threaten ships, but they still depend on communications, power, and supply chains behind them. That's exactly where Ukraine's pressure lands hardest. Kyiv isn't only watching the visible defensive line, it's going after the layers that keep that line functioning at all. Airfields get targeted because aircraft need runways, fuel, repair crews, and protected storage. Logistics depots get targeted because they hold the material keeping units combat ready. Air defense systems get targeted because every damaged radar or launcher opens a path for the next drone or missile. Ports and rail links matter just as much. Disrupt maritime facilities, and Russia has fewer ways to shift heavy cargo. Squeeze rail movement, and more of that burden shifts onto trucks and roads, which means more traffic, more exposure, and more demand for protection. A defense network that looks solid on a map can start cracking once its support routes come under repeated strain. None of this makes Crimea an easy target. Russia still has depth, prepared positions, and heavy political incentive to hold on. But Ukraine is working to raise the cost of that defense. The goal isn't just to break through walls, it's to make those walls harder to feed, harder to protect, and harder to command. And that's really where the strategy lands. Ukraine doesn't need to seize Crimea right away to shift the military balance around it. It just needs to make Russia pay more and more to keep the place running. Ukraine's campaign around Crimea is turning into a layered effort to drain the peninsula's military value before any bigger move gets seriously weighed. It was never really about one bridge, one convoy, or one fuel depot. It's the wider system letting Russia use Crimea for logistics, air defense, naval operations, storage, and command. Crimea isn't cut off, and Russia still holds real defensive strength there. But the direction of this war is shifting around the peninsula all the same. Crimea may not yet be the scene of a direct assault. It's already becoming the center of a long logistical siege. As always, our goal here isn't to glorify war, but to understand it. Studying battles, weapons, logistics, and strategy helps us grasp the human, political, and economic costs every conflict leaves behind. If this analysis was useful to you, hit like, subscribe to Military Force, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next report.